I'm Suzi Landolfi, and welcome to Be Crazy Well. Now, why would a therapist say that? Because we all have mental health struggles, even therapists. The good news is we have so much more information about how we can be crazy well. On my podcast, we don't focus on what's wrong with us. We want to know what happened to us. We're going to explore how trauma affected us, both negatively and positively. That's right. I said positively. It's called post-traumatic growth, and it's a real thing. Be Crazy Well will share mental health wellness practices, the newest mental health research, and most importantly, how we all get to create the person we deserve to be and the life we deserve to live. So join the mental health evolution and be crazy well. This is the kind of woman I work with, right? So I work with Lisa Parmeter, and she's the head of our HR. And as most people know, that stands for Human Resources. And I was thinking, you better have some of your own human resource to do this job. It's the hardest, most difficult, thankless, confusing. You get shit from everybody, from the people who hired you, from the people you're supposed to help. And so I said, she's doing human resources for a veteran nonprofit. So I'm going to bring her onto this podcast so that all of you out there get to know the crazy well people that I get to work with, because the name of the podcast, Lisa, is Be Crazy Well, right? So I'm not trying to stop people from being crazy. That's ridiculous.
I think we're all crazy well.
We all crazy well, and we need to be weller. We need to be more crazy weller, because those are the people that change the world. Like, people that disrupt are the people that change the world. Now, sometimes well and sometimes not well. So I couldn't think of a better crazy well person to bring on and to introduce you to everybody out there in the crazy well world than you. So first of all, in front of everybody, I want to thank you for who you are. You are such a blessing to this world, to our organization. And I felt like, oh my God, sister is here. I was so grateful when I met you and seen what you've done for this veteran organization. And what I think people don't know enough is they don't know how people get there. They don't know how people, especially civilians who are in a military family, marry someone in the military. How did you get to this point? And all that you had to learn and do and get through and keep growing, because that's really the story. That's the story for all of us. So,
Right.
all right. So I just wanted to let everybody know why I have you here and how important you are to us, to me personally, and to the organization. So tell us a little bit, Lisa, about, childhood a little bit, because everybody knows I'm all about the childhood, right? And how did you bring us up to this point, and then we'll talk about what that's like for you and for us in the military world, because I'm a civilian.
Yes. Childhood was, I kind of tell stories about my childhood, and people are like, that's not normal. I'm like, no, it was like a normal childhood, things you read of in books and see in movies. And they're like, no, that wasn't normal. Growing up in the 70s, I'm, older than people think, because I'm Italian and I'm petite, right? And I know, because you're the same, and we get that a lot.
Right.
My parents were older. They were born in the Depression, so mid 30s. I always thought, gosh, my parents are so old, On the flip side of that, I had free reign to go and run and play and be gone and missing, and and then my brother is about 15 months older than me, and it was just he and I. And then in the new neighborhood I grew up with, it was mostly boys. So I was running around with my shirt off till I was like 9 years old, until a neighbor friend was like, "That's a girl, put that shirt on." And I, didn't think anything of it. I'm out there playing football and fist fights, So the athletic piece of that was just kind of born through those interactions with, all that sports and activity and running and playing. And so I got into, some sports at 6 years old, swimming, and started off playing like baseball with my brother. And I remember asking like, I want to play baseball too. But my dad was like, well, you can only play softball at this point in your life. We're talking the mid 70s, right?
Right.
So, and I got into softball, tennis, volleyball, whatever I could get into for a sport, skiing. And I love competition. So really got into that. Looking back, I did, have kind of the unicorn childhood, whereas it was a new neighborhood. It was a safe neighborhood. Not necessarily small town living. I was in the city of, I was born in Red Bank, New Jersey. And then my family moved to Virginia for a short while. And then we moved to Charleston, West Virginia. So I ended up there around age of like 3 or 4. And then stayed there till I was 18. And then I went off to school in New York for fashion design and business. Because I just wanted to
Wait. Let me get this straight. This tomboy who's not wearing any top, and we don't call them tomboys or tomgirls anymore. This amazing athletic young woman is going to do fashion design. I mean, I'm just looking at this. You did all this sports and stuff, and you go, okay, I don't mind moving into the more girly girl world now.
I had a neighbor who would travel to East Asia every year for business. And he was in the music world. So sold music products, was a teacher, and he would bring back these fashion magazines from, the high-end couture stuff, which we didn't have. So seeing these models in the W magazine, and I was just very enamored with this whole scene. And I'm like, I need to be a part of that. So
that's so neat.
Yeah.
What a great story. Yeah. So now you're in New York. Like you said, you went to New York. Where'd you go? You just said it.
So Fordham University, Marymount College of Fordham University, and I played 3 sports, partial sports scholarship, swimming, volleyball, and tennis. And people were like, how'd you do that? Well, the seasons didn't align. So I'd go from sport to sport to sport. And my coaches would kind of let me, because I was already training over here. So they would say, just keep training with them. But, early on, and being that really aggressive female, in sports, I would get into trouble with my coaches. I would always, like volleyball, I was the setter because I'm short. And so always going for the ball, and they really would have to sit me out and just say, like, settle down. And I'd get really mouthy. That Italian would come out in me. And so, yeah, but it's so funny because people probably know you're from Massachusetts.
Wicked pissa, I am.
So when I moved to New York, and there was a couple, I met a couple ladies that I wasn't from the South. West Virginia is kind of one of those weird in the middle states. It's really a northern state, but some people with twangs like me who spoke slowly. As city, you city folk compared to us, I met these ladies from Massachusetts, and there was this one person in particular, and I literally was like, are you speaking English? Like, can you slow down? So anyways, yeah, so worked in New York City for a few years, and married this fellow that I had met who went to West Point, that I would go up there for some football games, who was a friend of a friend. But yeah.
So from college to college, not necessarily college to military. You weren't thinking this was military. You were thinking it more college.
Yeah, and I went off and did my own thing in New York City for a few years. He went off, and I dated him in college for about a year, not quite. He went into the Army. I went and did my fashion design thing, and then years later, he called me out of the blue. Was like, because he went to Korea and doing all kinds of Ranger school, kinds of weird things. And my dad was in the Army during the 60s. And so I didn't have any exposure to that.
Right. You didn't have any direct exposure. You would have some, now looking back, you would have some influence from it.
He would tell me stories.
Right.
So but that really was from a different time.
Yeah.
The draft and,
Mhm.
that whole experience. So, and I just was like, well, I'm living in New York City. And then he ends up in DC and he calls me and I'm like, oh, he's back. So
And,
yeah, then
and
then we were married for 20, well, we still are married, obviously, but I was with him during some military time for about 21, 22 years. So I moved all over the world, lived in Germany for almost 6 years, lived in South Korea, all over the US.
so you didn't really choose this with an open eye. You chose the guy more than you chose knowing about the military, right? Would that
And
is
not
that fair
only
to say?
that, but the West, for anybody who goes and tours West Point, it's very different. And the duty station that he lived at when I married him was the old guard, which they're the soldiers that bury people at the National Cemetery, right?
Right.
But we lived on Fort Myer, which again, we're living next door to like a 3-star general, and very different from the second 10 years that I was with him, where the combat started. And you couldn't get out of that cycle of combat and the deployments. And at that time too, having 2 small children, and I had a dog that had cancer. I was living in Germany. My family was dying. I mean, it was like layers and layers of chaos and stress. And so,
How did you manage that? I mean, it looks so coming into it kind of later in life. You're not 17, 18, marrying this,
right.
you know, guy in the army or in the military, and you're like not that savvy to it, and you've already started your own life, right, in New York.
Right.
So how did you keep managing what was thrown at you all the time? What were some of the hardest things for you to deal with, and what were some of the superpowers and the things that made you who you are today?
So the nomadic lifestyle, which it really is, there are certain MOSs, which is kind of your work category within the military, that move a lot. My husband was infantry, so we moved a lot. We were moving every we were only in one place for 3 years. Rest of it was like a year to 2 years. And I am like that adventurer, which after a year, I'm like, where are we moving next? Very exciting, but probably the first 4 years, I realized pretty quickly, I've got to go back to school for my master's in something else totally unrelated. But having, a bachelor's and that business background, I was able to navigate it, and just talking with a couple people who were in human resources. And I thought, I don't want to teach. I can't be a nurse. I do not do well with like blood, So what can I do? And this is probably it. So I went and got a master's in administration, human resources concentration. And then that really panned out for me that I could start working into that field. And I had already done some operations stuff. So really kind of joining that together, and just kind of, whenever you move, I get that people want to be picky and they, wait for your dream job. And when you're moving every 2 years, within the first 3 months, like if you're 3 months in, you're biting your nails, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got another year and 3/4. I've got to find something.
Right.
And then so I kept working, kept moving my way up. But that time in Germany was difficult, because when we landed in Germany, I had a master's, I had a work background, but the jobs for Americans were very, it was hard to get a work visa. So the entry level jobs there were going to PhDs. I mean, I just couldn't even compete. So with my background in art, I thought, well, what can I do here? And I'm going to start being creative and see if something likes what I do. Because I've done paintings before where people had asked me to have prints of them. And I was like, oh, no, that's too much work. I don't want to do that. So I made this painting, and then people asked me to do prints. So in Germany, I'm the crazy American, like calling people out of just cold calling, like all these Germans, like, help me, I need to find a printer. I need this specific type of print. It can't just be like a copy, right? It had to be a lithograph. So in this teeny tiny town, like far, far away, an hour and a half, and this is before GPS. I met this fellow through the connections, and this kind of goes into that navigating your world, right? And figuring out how to get things done. Problem solving, right? 101. And so I show up at this place that I was told about to get this print made. And it's this farmhouse, and there's chickens all over. And the guy comes out and opens the door, and inside is this, first-rate state-of-the-art print shop. So it was pretty neat. So yeah, so for about 5 years, I had different prints, and that's how I made my money. And people be like, we need a print and usually it was like for a farewell gift. And then I had some military groups reach out to me and commission a few things. So I was busy.
Well, that you're always going to be busy. I get that now. And so I love people to hear. So you're a child making your way in an all-male world in West Virginia, in sports, and you're just one of the tribe. You're just going to go along and you're not taking no for an answer, and you're going to stay busy and be creative and do your thing. And I think also the adventurous part of you mentioned that you went from sports and Charlestown, Virginia, West Virginia, to New York, to Fordham. Like, you didn't need any kind of, let me dip my toe in the water, and first I'll just go to Providence, Rhode Island, then I'll go. You just said, no, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing. So when I talk to people about their post-traumatic growth, their strength, their superpowers, I really mean it. When you don't wait for someone to give you something, you don't wait for someone to do something for you, you go and create the person you deserve to be, in the life you deserve to live. Right parallel alongside your husband. Because I think so many times in the military, what I have seen and what people have called me about in terms of their struggle is always putting their life aside for the military spouse. And I mean men and women. I'm not talking just the women for the men. I'm talking gay men and women, anybody that's working with, that somehow their life, what they need comes first. And then what you need and what you want to do comes second. That's not what you did. Like, you said, no, I'm of equal value. I've got to contribute and continue my individual life.
Right. And to your point, I am, and I've gotten some flack throughout life, but not that I've been called a loner, but I am very driven and that individualistic kind of side of me. Sometimes I guess I am a loner, but travel. So sports actually allowed me to travel. So I was never afraid to go anywhere. We would summer in Canada, and I would be like, who summers in Canada? Like, my dad bought a house. I'm like, oh, it's, black flies and the big horse flies. And we love to fish, because again, I'm doing that outdoorsy stuff. But early on too, just kind of looking back at my struggles in my childhood. And I say it was, rosy and whatever, but I did have a struggle. And when I was I think I was 8 or 9 years old, I decided that I'm going to tell my friends, I'm going to do a flip off this monkey bar thing. And they're like, do it, and I'm not going to back down. So I do this flip off of these monkey bars, and I land on my face on this screw, and it tore my nose in half. So, that challenge probably shaped me too, because early in life, I had this huge, it's faded. That's a long, long time ago. But, people would say Scarface and call me names. And I think because I was so active and I didn't let it bother me so much. I also had, my best friend also had a tumor in her cheek, and she was missing half her cheek. And maybe that's why we bonded, but we just, you know what, I would cover it with makeup. There was this model back then who did this really serious, like thick makeup, and I would have to cover it up. But, and it, at the time, you know, there wasn't, my parents, I don't think had health insurance. It was devastating. Um, they had to sell things to pay for that surgery. So I live with that kind of, you know, and there's been other struggles, but that was one that was right, like early on.
Sure. And I think you just, you said it so well, is that when you have a struggle, you have to find your own human resource. Like one of the things I think is important and why I love the title human resources is we're saying that you as a human deserve to create and practice and develop your own resource, resourcing yourself. So you're the first human resources person I've ever met that resources for themselves first. And that's what struck all of us at Merging Vets and Players. We said, wait a minute, this isn't just an administrator telling us about the paperwork and what we have to do and blah, blah, blah. This is a woman who has her own human resources in herself.
Yeah.
Words matter. So when I met you and I said, oh my God, I want to know how she got here and how
Yeah.
did she come into the military life and didn't give up yours? Because one of the things that sometimes bothers me a little bit is when we criticize the civilians. Now, a lot of spouses are civilians, like,
Yeah.
right? And so I think, and everybody in the military pretty much was a civilian for a short period of time, even if you grew up in a military family.
Right.
And what struck me about what you've been able to do is to honor being part of the military now and not losing that part of you that is civilian, that did not, quote, serve on the battlefield. You certainly served, but in a very different capacity. And to bring the best of both worlds together. That's how I experienced.
Yeah. And I think early on too, honestly, I think it just takes one person who believes in you.
Yeah.
And I had that, you know, I had that person who, and people really, who would say, don't worry about it. It's all going to be okay. Or, you know, stick it out, or you're going to be fine. And I know that negative self-talk because I've done it, but I've always, because of some kind of having a cheerleader and then going through the motions and seeing that you can do it, so that you can tell yourself, I can do that. I am fully capable. And when people tell me no, that drives me even harder, right? I think as far as like PTSD, I've definitely suffered, probably, and I get that combat veteran mindset, as my husband is one, and he had 3 tours in combat, and one of those tours was 15 months. But with one of those tours, and I was at Fort Hood during the shootings at the time, we thought it was a terrorist attack. We were locked down in schools and people were running it, you know, it was just chaos. There was another time, well, there's a few other times, but there's another really difficult time that I was living in Germany. And June 21st, and we talk about dates, right? You help people remember their dates, and what do you do with that, and how can you honor people? And my neighbor who babysat my kids, 15 years old, babysat my kids, mowed my yard, like the best kid that you ever met in your life. His mom, well, his dad was deployed. His mom was heading to the States for her oldest daughter, and they said, can you be the medical power of attorney? I was like, gosh, you know, my kids are young. I just, no, but I'll be here if he needs me, if he needs anything, because he was going to Italy. And so he came back and I saw him, and he, again, just an angel. And the next day somebody was screaming, like, come over here. And I went over there and he was on the floor, and I gave him CPR and he passed away. So that really stuck with me. Yeah. But at the same time, we didn't know this. We're calling Iraq to tell them what had happened, right? Because we had one line that was a direct line to the brigade staff. This guy, his father was a commander of 126 Infantry. He was in a really bad area, and they'd have a lot of casualties. But we were like, why can't we get a hold of these people? What is going on? We've always, been able to contact them. Well, that same time, 5 people in that unit had gotten killed. And the helicopter came to pick up this dad, the commander, and he thought he was getting fired because he just lost 5 of his guys. And he's like, well, because they did that.
Yeah.
And so they brought him back to brigade headquarters and had to tell him that, oh, by the way, your son had passed away.
Yeah. Wow.
Woo.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
it's hard.
yeah. And it goes back to that idea of constantly creating, shoring up, practicing, nurturing your own resource. Right?
Yes.
And
it took a lot of practice after that. And right. I had somebody tell me, go do yoga, that's going to be helpful. Go do this, go do that. Well, here I am in yoga thinking it's a competition sport, right? And I'm doing like, okay, I'm going to beat everybody. And then it took me about 3 weeks to settle in. It's like, that's not what this is about.
There is something about, and I just wanted everybody to know, there's something about being smaller than most people. Like, we're the average height of a 6th grader. And I always have to say to people, in order for me to be able to go on a walk with someone who's 5 inches or more taller than I am, or even 4, I have to walk harder and faster to keep up, because I have to take 2 steps to their 1. So, right. I'm like booking it while we're walking, and they're just kind of sauntering, and they don't get that I got to push in order to keep up, right? So there is that thing about, how did I find resources to do things I couldn't do because I was so small? And I think that that's also important to remember, right? And also living in with the boys and saying, oh, I just want to do everything that they do. I have a right to do everything that they do, and finding the resource to do that.
That, and then understanding too, and I'm constantly reading and looking for advice and talking to people. I'm never one to kind of sit mentally idle, because I'm like, the more I know, the more I realize I don't know anything. But during some difficult times after a friend passed away, and then my dad had passed away, I just was like on this hamster wheel, and people talk about it, like on this hamster wheel. I'm like, oh my gosh. My mother-in-law sent me this book, being the 80s kid that I am. It's called Wherever You Go, There You Are, right? Well, Buckaroo Banzai. I mean, it's like, brilliant. I'm in. But it was a great book because it talked about just being in the moment. I'd never heard that concept before, and kind of, washing dishes and just really completing the job, and how it's, take the little wins. And then in that same book too, and this is, I don't know about you, my mom was Catholic, I was brought up Episcopal, but they do the peace be with you in church. And I'm like, oh, I hate touching people. Like, I don't like this part of church. But in this book, it was like, this changed my mind. That might be the only time in somebody's life that they touch people, during the day, during the week, during the year.
That's right. That's right.
And I thought, I never thought of it that way, because that didn't, it just didn't happen to me. So
no, it's absolutely true. And the more we actually have to have physical touch to stay alive. And we figured that out actually during a war, when they took care of all these wonderful babies that were orphaned and brought them to the hospital, because they figured, oh, well, they'll definitely survive in the hospital. And they kept them clean and wrapped them all up and fed them, but they never touched them. They never hugged them. They never, and the babies died, and they couldn't understand, like, we did everything right and they still died. Well, they did the one thing that the baby absolutely had to have, which is that touch. So you're
Right.
absolutely right. We have to do that. One of the things that we notice about MVP and what we do when we put the combat veterans together, and just any veteran together, and the athletes, is how physical they are, how much they do touch, how much they don't mind that hugging, and really want that. So I think you're right. There are things that happen in sports and in the
Yeah.
military that are very similar about that and how important that is for that connection.
Right.
You've been just such a gift for us, and so I want everybody to be inspired that one thing we do is don't keep looking outside of yourself for your human resource. Like, start with yourself. Start
Mhm.
with getting yourself physically stronger and healthier, emotionally stronger and healthier, and self-aware, like what you just talked about, right? Intellectually, like, go read, go find some more information. And I just did a podcast on how it's important to live in the I don't know, and how I have know-it-allism. I suffer from know-it-allism. And so how important it is to keep understanding, oh, I don't know shit about anything right now, right? So
Right.
that as well, the spiritual connection. And when I say physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and financial, I always want to say financial is just a metaphor for all your resources.
Mhm.
Every resource you have, your energy, your time, your water, like we're in California right now, and like we've got to manage all of our resources and take care of them,
Right.
right? So,
Yeah. And
Mhm.
and I was there 2 years ago. I was living in the Bay Area for about 5 years. So we had the brown lawn and, moving to Bentonville, Arkansas, green, lush. We don't have to water. There's water everywhere. So, again, it has been good, um, from a growth perspective, living globally and traveling globally. Um, I think it's been really important for me. The other thing, and you and I were talking about this, where people are like, okay, you know, when you take off the uniform, like, how do you identify yourself? And people would say, either the uniform or, you kind of go down the laundry list, whether it's sports or whatever. But I even peel it back. We were talking about this, like, peel back more. Okay, I'm a good person. I'm a good friend, I'm capable, right?
Right.
To a point, but there's more kind of ground level, like, information in my brain that I always will revert back to, like, this isn't who I am, the wrinkles, the gray hair, but like, there's other things about me that I know bring a smile to other people's face, bring joy to other people, just like they do to me. So it's hard sometimes when you're going through difficult times to think of yourself as that, but I think everybody should work retail because that really solidifies that.
I
And
agree. I agree. I've worked with
customer
you.
facing, and having all those interactions, because sometimes I say stakeholders, customers, members, right? Those words are interchangeable. But
Right.
when you're speaking with somebody, and you've seen me, it's like the stone face, because it's like they're at this point at a snapshot in time. This isn't necessarily who they are.
That's right.
And to have the grace to kind of understand that and give them that. But
I'm still
it can
working
be
on that.
challenging.
I'm still practicing that because I am half Italian too. So you might be full Italian. I'm half Italian. So,
Half.
yeah. Oh, you're half too. Yeah. Lisa, bless you. Thank you for this so much. And everybody, go look up Merging Vets and Players. It's www.vetsandplayers.org, and find out what Lisa has to deal with. We have 7, almost 8 chapters around the country right now, all the staff, all that she has to deal with. And then you'll go, oh, of course she does. Look at her. We just met her. She can handle all that shit, no problem.
Throw
And
it at me.
right, and you have helped our staff feel safer. So the most important thing to me is that we have safe adults that work with us, principled safe adults. That's when you're safe, when you're principled. And because I've been with the organization now for almost 2.5 years, I've watched how they have had to deal with people coming in and out in administration, and watching them go like this. They see Lisa and they go, oh, good, Lisa's here. Right? And it's like, oh, good, thank God Lisa's here. Uh, that's
Probably about my stories, though. I tell a lot of weird stories.
I
It's
love
not like
that.
I've told.
That's why you fit right in, Lisa. That's why you fit right in. We don't want the person without the weird stories, because it's be crazy well. So without your
Right.
crazy, we really wouldn't want you.
That's right.
It's very well crazy. Thank you again. Bless you. Bless you, everybody. And I'll talk to everybody next week. And definitely go check Lisa Parmeter out. I said that right? That's
Yeah.
Puerto Rican? What did you say? Your
No,
husband?
my husband was from Puerto Rico, but I think it's German or English.
Yeah, I was gonna say it
So I
sounds
never dug
German
in
to
too
me.
much.
And I'm going to Puerto Rico tomorrow for a
I'm
week.
jealous. He grew up in Aguadilla.
I'm so looking forward to it. It's going to be challenging to be on vacation. I'm not quite sure that I know how to do that, but I'm going to practice. I'm going to be crazy well on vacation.
Have
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Bye. Love you.
You too. Bye.
Love yourself.